Today I'd like to talk about Arthur Findlay's book, On the Edge of the Etheric, subtitled Survival After Death, Scientifically Explained. And who better to talk about such matters than Arthur Findlay? Take a look at all the presidencies, all the different unions and associations that he was chairman or a president of, or the ordinary member of. Amazing. This book is the 67th edition of a book that was first printed in 1931. 67th edition went out in 1977, being translated into 19 languages, and even in 1977 it was printed in the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, as well as Great Britain. So let's take a little look at some photographs of Arthur Findlay. Here's Arthur Findlay. And this is John Campbell Sloan. And this is Stansted Hall. And that's the property, Stansted Hall in Stansted Mount Fitchett. So let's open On the Edge of the Etheric and read from chapter 4 about the medium. Mr. John C. Sloan, in whose presence the experiences I have to relate occurred, is a middle-aged man of slight build and a quiet manner. He has rather a dreamy expression and, when sitting still and not speaking or taking part in a conversation, he seems to lose touch with his surroundings. When he has nothing special to occupy his attention, this dreamy state seems to take hold of him, and he becomes absent-minded and forgetful. Except for this, he is like any other healthy, normal individual. All his life he has been aware that supernormal occurrences took place in his immediate surroundings. In his youth, he was often disturbed by rappings and strange voices, which he could not understand, and, during the past 30 years, these have developed into manifestations of a general and varied nature. His mediumship during these years has embraced trance, telekinesis, apports, direct voice, materialization, clairvoyance, and clairaudience. These have varied in degree year by year, but his friends generally agree that 15 years ago his mediumship was at its best. To those who have had little experience of these phenomena, let me explain. Trance is a state of unconsciousness certain abnormal people experience. It might be compared to falling into a deep sleep with a short interval between consciousness and unconsciousness. It is, however, more than sleep. It is a much deeper state of unconsciousness. The personality is withdrawn to a greater extent, and the body is more insensible to pain. A person in trance can be better compared to one under an anesthetic than one in sleep, with this difference, that the trance state may last for from 2 to 3 hours and be repeated several times a week, without any ill effect being noticeable. When Sloan is in this state he speaks, but it would be more correct to say that his vocal organs vibrate the atmosphere, as no one can be with him long while this is taking place and think that his own personality is responsible for what is said. The voice is different and the accent is different, and much of what is said is quite outside his range of knowledge. Clairaudience and clairvoyance are the powers some have of hearing what to others is inaudible, and seeing what is normally unseen. Both are due to the etheric structure of the ear and eye functioning abnormally, and thus these organs can catch the etheric vibrations. Telekinesis is the word used for the movement of objects without the use of any force. Apports are objects brought from one room to another or from a distance to where the medium is by some invisible agency. What is called the direct voice is the special subject of this book in the medium's presence, but quite apart from him. Voices claiming to be those of deceased people speak and, when replied to, answer back intelligently, which proves that there is not only a mind behind the voice, but that the intelligence is able to hear as well as to speak. When first experiencing these phenomena, I naturally thought that the medium was impersonating people, as, when these voices speak, it is generally in the dark, and what could be easier than that he should be tricking me and others into believing that we were speaking to our departed friends. On the first occasion I experienced these voices, I was decidedly suspicious, and yet, as the séance went on, I wondered how it would be possible for any man, even if he had accomplices, to carry on such an imposture for over 3 hours. 30 separate voices spoke that night, of different tone and accent. They gave their names, their correct earth addresses, and spoke to the right people, who recognized them, and referred to intimate family affairs. Never once was a mistake made, and the darkness really increased the evidence in favour of the genuineness of the whole proceedings. Difficult as it would be to remember everyone's departed friends and relations and their family affairs in the light, it would be doubly so in the dark, because 15 people were present and the medium would have to remember exactly where everyone was sitting. The voice on every occasion spoke in front of the person who recognized the name, the earth address, and the details which were given. It was all very mystifying, and the fact that sometimes 2 or 3 voices spoke at once did not make it less so. There must be accomplices, I thought, and not only that, but a regular system of gathering information. How could it be done in so thorough a manner was the question, but yet, on the other hand, how could the dead speak? Even if they lived again, their physical vocal organs were certainly buried, and how could the atmosphere be vibrated without a physical bodily instrument? No, nothing so impossible could happen. I had heard of frauds and impostors, but never of the dead speaking, so the balance was certainly in favour of fraud. Thus ran my thoughts that memorable night of the 20th of September 1918, when suddenly a voice spoke in front of me. I felt scared. A man sitting next to me said, "Someone wants to speak to you, friend." So I said, "Yes, who are you?" "Your father, Robert Downey Findlay," the voice replied, and then went on to refer to something that only he and I and one other ever knew on earth. And that other, like my father, was some years dead. I was therefore the only living person with any knowledge of what the voice was referring to. That was extraordinary enough, but my surprise was heightened when, after my father had finished, another voice gave the name of David Kidston, the name of the other person who, when on earth, knew about the subject, and he continued the conversation which my father had begun. No spy system, however thorough, no impersonation by the medium or by any accomplices, could be responsible for this, and moreover, I was an entire stranger to everyone present. I did not give my name when I entered the room. I knew no one in that room, and no one knew me or anything about me, and that was my introduction to John Campbell Sloan and the direct voice. And after the séance was over, I asked him if I could come back again, as I was anxious to know more about this subject. "Certainly, any time you care to come, I shall be pleased to see you," was his reply. And I turned to someone standing near and asked how much I should pay. I have always remembered the reply: "If you suggest such a thing as paying him, he will be deeply offended. He does this as a duty, not to make money out of this mediumship." And that did not impress me as the method which would have been adopted by any fraudster. How could a working man earning a few pounds a week, I wondered, afford the time and the money to gather all the information I heard given to the people present that evening? I was so impressed with my strange experience that I went home that night and wrote till the small hours of the next morning a careful account of all that occurred at this my first séance, and this practice I have constantly adopted, unless I had a stenographer present. It would have been absolutely marvellous to record these voices. Arthur Findlay went on to record every séance he attended, and he attended quite a lot, across the next 30 years. And so he's got a tremendous body of evidence in his records. Some of his records then form a variety of his books, and this one was only one. I don't know how many books he did in total. I've got about 8 or 9 of them in my own collection. And Arthur Findlay was given specific evidence there that 3 people on the earth plane knew, and yet a voice was telling him the fact. So 3 people on the earth plane knew the fact, and it was now being related back to him. And that happened not so much to me, but it was the one thing that put me onto spiritualism in the first place. I had a friend who I worked with who said that she had one particular fact that only one other person on the earth plane knew the fact when the fact occurred, and yet when she was in front of a medium, that fact was related back to her. So either this third party, the medium, was reading my friend's mind or reading the other person's mind. I don't know. But I thought if she was reading her mind, that would have been impressive anyway. Or she was doing what she said she was doing, and that was talking with the other person. And by this time, the other person had died. So I thought to myself straight away, if she's relating the fact back, and she's getting it from the other person who's talking with her, then that's proving life beyond physical death. I thought to myself, I've got to find out about that. That was back in 1993, and I've been finding out about it ever since. But we're not expecting anybody to take Arthur Findlay's word for what he witnessed, although you could read dozens of his accounts. Now this one is in the same book, and it's a bunch of other persons' witness testimonies, and he's got 2 or 3 different categories of testimony, and this one might be category 1, and it's taken from a Mr. McCulley's testimony. So these are Mr. McCulley's words, and in the original print of the book, Arthur Findlay gave Mr. McCulley's address, which was in Glasgow, but he had to remove it from subsequent editions because a steady path of people beat a pathway to his door and knocked on the door and asked him, "Can you tell me more about your experiences?" And here's his testimony, where he starts with, "One of the most vivid and impressive messages I have ever received was from a young brother of mine. Johnny was his name. He had passed over suddenly at the age of 12. He was the youngest of the family, and of course, the apple of his mother's eye. Shortly after his death, Mum went to Australia, where our other brothers lived. Every letter from those brothers in Australia told me of her grief and despondency. Well, Johnny came through to me at one of Sloan's seances. After establishing his identity, I asked him if he knew where our mother was. Yes, he replied. I've just left her. She is on a big ship, sitting on a deck, drinking tea. Through my mind flashed the thought, is Mother coming back to Britain? And this mental question must have been read by him as he continued. No, I don't think so. But write and tell her not to grieve so much. Her grief makes me unhappy, and I cannot be happy whilst she is so unhappy. Well, to me the message was not that easily understandable. I couldn't understand what my mother was doing on a big ship if she were not coming home. But at any rate, I wrote out Johnny's message and sent it on to Perth in Australia. A week or two later, a letter came telling me that one of the brothers had, in an attempt to lift her despondency, bought Mother a ticket for a first-class trip round Australia, and that she was currently then on her way to visit a daughter in Sydney. When in Sydney, the daughter took her mother to a medium, where she got the same message from Johnny in the same words, namely, not to grieve so much, as it made him so unhappy. So there's an interesting testimony. The spirit person is telling the person located in Britain about events that were concurrent, happening at the same time in a different time zone on the exact opposite side of the world in Australia. And in those days, there was no Zoom, there was no YouTube, or telephones, or internet. He could not possibly have known where his mother was or what she was doing unless he'd already been advised that she was on a ship. So I thought that was good testimony. And you've got to wonder, how is all this possible? How are these voices and mediumship, and how is it possible to survive physical death? And the simple answer to that is it's all about consciousness. And Arthur Findlay, being the intelligent man that he is, he lays out his ideas about the science behind surviving physical death. And the book has subtitled Survival After Death, Scientifically Explained. So he draws on the science of 1930s, 1930 exactly, 1931, published this book. And it's the best knowledge that they had at that time. And in a couple of Arthur's books, he lays out this table of who we are, where we are in the universe. And essentially, we are in the black area there. That's us in that black area. And in that black area is every single thing in the universe. Every single thing that you can see, hear, or touch. That is the physical universe. But if you look at the table, there's a massive amount of things going on above and below the physical universe. That thing is going to go all over that page. I wouldn't worry about it. So the table is actually a table of vibrations of atoms, electrons and protons that we call an atom. There's more than just electrons and protons. And the black area of the table represents what our physical senses and perceive. And Arthur says that it's from 34,000 waves to an inch, and then the range then goes from 34 up to 64,000 waves to an inch. Below 34,000 waves to an inch, we can't perceive it with our senses. Above 64,000 waves to an inch, it's again imperceptible to our physical senses. But there's plenty of things going on below and above those two maximums and minimums. For instance, you've got, beyond the infrared, you've got heat waves, short radio waves, microwaves, and long radio waves. And now you'd have TV waves as well, wouldn't you? And I'm not sure how the internet gets put out there, but maybe those waves. And above the ultraviolet, we've got things like gamma rays, X-rays. You look at dolphins, for instance, they can use sonar, so their range, their piece of black in the table is wider than ours. A bat similarly uses sonar, so you would think that their range was wider. When you see your pet looking up, for instance, a dog or a cat, when we used to come home from a spiritual church service, the dog used to go crazy, not just to welcome us in, but he'd be looking up and about, he'd be going out the passageway, he'd be looking in the air all the time, all around. We think he was looking at the spirit people who came home with us. And pets often demonstrate that, don't they? And when you think about it, a person who can develop and express really advanced psychic abilities, their range of vibration must not be limited to the 64,000 on the 34,000 waves. You could express that range in terms of waves of sound, but then you talk in crazy numbers of the lowest at 400 billion and the highest 750 billion waves a second. But it's only a fraction of what is out there. And so to develop mediumship, you develop psychic abilities first, and then you develop your sensitivity to expand the normal physical senses range that much further. We'll take another reading from the book now, and this is in the section on nights of instruction, where Arthur would attend John Sloan's seances, and a guide would come through, a spirit person of deep intellect or profound spiritual knowledge, and the sitters would question the guide on all subjects, any kind of thing you'd like to talk about. And this question is, how is it that you can speak to us on earth? And the answer was, by materializing my etheric mouth and tongue. So the next question, can you tell me something of the method by which this was done? And the answer is, I shall do my best to make you understand how this is done, but remember, you cannot get a proper grasp of the difficulties we are faced with until you yourself come across to our side. However, I shall explain our methods as clearly as possible. From the medium and those present, a chemist in the etheric world withdraws certain ingredients, which, for want of a better name, is called ectoplasm. To this, the chemist, that's the spirit chemist, adds ingredients of his own making. When these are mixed together, a substance is formed, which enables the chemist to materialize his hands. He then, with his materialized hands, constructs a mask, resembling the mouth and tongue. The spirit wishing to speak places his face into this mask and finds it clings to him. It gathers round his mouth, tongue, and throat. At first, difficulty is experienced in moving this heavier material, but by practice this becomes easy. The etheric organs have once again become clothed in matter resembling physical matter, and by the passage of air through them, your atmosphere can be vibrated and you hear his voice. But how do you get this air? Are the lungs also materialized? That was the next question. And the answer is, in a full materialization, yes. So somebody says, I've often heard 2 or sometimes 3 voices speak at once. Are other masks used in these circumstances? Yes, on these occasions, conditions are good, and the chemist has sufficient ectoplasm to construct several masks, which are all sometimes used at the same time. That accounts for your hearing more than one voice speaking. Question: where is this mask placed? Usually in the center of the circle. The chemist keeps as much ectoplasm as possible within the circle. But when the quantity given off by the medium and sitters is small, it gathers about the floor, which accounts for voices coming from the floor when conditions are poor. On the other hand, when conditions are good and we have an ample supply, we can build right up to the ceiling, which accounts for the voices on these occasions coming from high up in the room. Question: after the mask is completed, what do you do? The person wishing to speak takes up his position in the center of the circle and presses into the ectoplasmic materialization, and then commences to speak, moving his mouth and tongue just as you do when you speak. Fascinating. What do you think? I think I'm totally absorbed with that. I sat in a physical circle with a lady, and her mediumship was absolutely exceptional, and it was independent or direct voice. Sometimes the voice would be from her vocal cords, and sometimes it would be apart from her. Whether they used her vocal cords or whether they used the mask and the ectoplasm and the spirit person used it directly, it all sort of followed the same pattern. There was a great deal of practice by the new speaker when tremendous noises would come out, and they were very high-pitched and sharp. And then eventually one person could gain enough experience and be able to talk fluently. And over a long period of time, a couple of years, I heard novice speakers from the spirit world become fluent speakers. And their voices were always recognizable as their particular voice. They were usually famous people, and other phenomena occurred connected with the voices. For instance, one man's voice was a man called Wolf Messing. When you read a book about hair messing, you find that his voice is world-renowned for being uniquely deep and guttural. He's born in the the German-speaking part of Poland before the Second World War. And so it's Germanic, and he was also of Jewish extraction, so therefore it's Yiddish as well, and unique. And when he speaks, you can recognize the same person speaking every time. Well, the medium was an incredibly beautifully voiced, fabulous singing voice, female. So how does she do these incredible, deep, gruff male voices? You know, it makes you wonder. And each male voice, being a different person themselves, was unique and was different and was the same every week. So I struggled to think that was ventriloquism. I don't think it could have possibly been. And they bring other evidence as well, like the names. How did the medium know the names? Wolf Messing, for instance, was a famous mind reader. So in the car, we used to travel to see the medium. And in the car going down this one day, I'd been thinking, how did Wolf Messing do his mind reading? So in the middle of the journey, I said to the passenger in the front of the car with me, I said, I've been thinking, I don't think you should have any more cats now the previous one had just died. And my friend said, how do you know I was thinking about cats? Are you reading my mind? And when we had the tea break then after the seance, I was talking with a passenger I had in the back of the car, and we were talking about UFOs. And this lady had said she'd seen UFOs. So in the middle of the journey on the way home, I said to the lady in the back of the car, you know that story you had about seeing a UFO? Maybe it hit the papers because, maybe it was a common thing and lots of people saw it. And she said, how did you know I was thinking about that right now? Are you reading my mind? So I think Wolf Messing gave me a demonstration of how he did his mind reading. So there was evidence like that came along with every one of these voices. The one time the main guide's voice was different was after the time the medium had an operation on her throat. And then the next seance, the main guide's voice was fairly young, strong, vibrant, and different, but recognizable as the same person. It went back to as it was before, when it generally came through as an old man, an old Victorian gentleman's voice. And it went back to that. So that was the only time I heard that one guide talk differently. What Arthur Findlay thought of it all. For one thing, he says that by 1930 you could talk in wider society about these issues, mediumship. He was getting that you could speak at a dinner table, at one's club, in a railway train, without being made to feel that your friends look upon you with sincere pity as one so sensible in any other way, somewhat unbalanced in this direction. I trust, therefore, that what I am about to relate will receive more consideration than was accorded to the writings of some who have gone before me. Back in 1930, until another 20 years later, the British government was still arresting mediums, charging them with ridiculous charges of vagrancy, which is the charge they used to apply to people lying about in the city, town centres as tramps. They were vagrants. How could you say a medium in a spiritualist church was a vagrant, I ask you? And Arthur Conan Doyle, one of the last things he did for spiritualism in 1930 was to appear with a deputation to the Home Secretary in Downing Street and appeal, for spiritualism and mediumship to be given legal status. Evidence, cumulative evidence, and still more evidence will in the end win the day. With this weapon, the walls of ignorance and antagonism are being brought low. There is no stronger tool available to complete destruction than the evidence of survival obtained by the direct or independent voice. Both names for this phenomenon are used, and they refer to the phenomenon of voice production and speech from some intelligence quite apart from any being in the flesh. The direct voice is the highest psychical phenomena yet discovered, and it is the most convincing, besides being quite the most wonderful. All the other discoveries of man fade into insignificance when compared with this great discovery, the discovery of a direct method of communication between us and the departed, not by means of raps or taps, but by the most intimate of all forms of communication, the human voice. Other forms of psychic phenomena can be simulated by a fraudulent medium, but the direct voice, at its best, cannot be simulated, that is. Often have I and others with me heard 2 and sometimes 3 separate voices of different tone and personality speaking at the same time on different topics, known only to the person addressed, while the medium was either talking on some other subject to the person sitting next to him, or I had my ear close up to his mouth and not a sound was proceeding from his lips. The front cover of this particular edition says, "The book that supplies the key to the mystery of death and makes the etheric world understandable. It attempts to locate scientifically the etheric world and place it on the map of the universe. It marks the entrance to a new age of thought, and the acceptance of the facts it contains will unite religion and science, and should bring humanity together in a common brotherhood." We still live in hope on that one, because that's 1930, Second World War, 1939 to 45. And look what is happening now out in the Ukraine, and countless wars in between. C'est la vie. Arthur Findlay used to like to call the spirit world the etheric world, because he thought etheric sounded more tangible than the word spirit implies. He says there it's attempts to locate scientifically where it's located, and that would be in the bulk of the universe that is hidden to our normal physical senses. And I heard it said that our physical senses can only perceive 5% of what is in the universe. So all the stars that you look up and see in the night sky on a clear night, you can't count them. Just imagine how much physical universe we can perceive. If that's only 5% of what's out there, how much and what is in the other 95%? And the suggestion is that the etheric or spirit world is somewhere in that 95% at a different rate of vibration to the molecules and atoms that vibrate on the earth plane in the physical. So before we go, I'm not going to be able to play any recordings from the seances I attended, because they are the property of somebody else and they're very private people. But there is one example of electronic voice phenomena, or independent voice, that I actually have. So I'm going to play you that one, and you can find it on my YouTube channel and some of the Facebook groups I'm in, such as Margaret and Paul's Togetherness group.
Yeah, hundreds and hundreds. Hundreds. I mean, wow. It's yeah, hundreds and hundreds. Hundreds. I mean, wow. It's
So they've typed, somebody has taken the effort originally to produce those typed manuscripts, and there's a lot of them. How many of them are there then?
A lot.
You have a lot. What are we talking, 200, 20?
Yeah, hundreds and hundreds. Hundreds. I mean, wow. It's I'm actually in discussion with Paul.
Those typed manuscripts, and there's a lot of them. How many of them are there then?
A lot.
You have a lot. What are we talking, 200, 20?
Yeah, hundreds and hundreds. Hundreds. I mean, wow. It's I'm actually in discussion with Paul. Yeah, hundreds and hundreds. Hundreds. I mean, wow. It's yeah, hundreds and hundreds. Hundreds. I mean, wow. It's yeah, hundreds and hundreds. Hundreds. I mean, wow. It's
I just love that. And Brandon and myself were just talking via Zoom. So I'm sitting in the room above. Margaret was 4.5 meters away. Didn't say a word. She was on her computer. Brandon is over in New York State. And we were talking about Brandon J. Kim's book, about Red Cloud, a spirit guide, and you can check out the book as a fabulous read. I won't do one of these talks on the particular book because Brandon and myself talked about the book for a good half an hour, and it's on YouTube, so you can see the interview. And when we did the interview, neither of us heard that extra voice. And in fact, when you listen to the full recordings, there seems to be a male voice as well, other than us two, somewhere in the recordings. But I didn't quite catch that one. One of Brandon's friends asked Brandon, "Who's the lady who said hundreds?" Brandon said, "What are you talking about?" So she pointed out what was said. And then Brandon asked me, "Was that Margaret?" And there's another video I've got on YouTube, a little bit, that video, but a little tiny bit extended. Because when we were actually making the full recording, Margaret's mobile phone went off right next to me. And Zoom has a filter in it to stop background sound from affecting the recording. And the phone went off, well, as loud as they go off, very loud. You can see me look down at it. It's right next to me. The sound of it going off did not come out on the recording. Then Margaret came across, picked up the phone, walked downstairs to take the call, and she was talking all the way down the stairs. I could hear it, but none of that was picked up on the recording. So how did that word hundreds get onto this recording? I'm sitting back from the computer. The microphone is a foot away from me. Did she sit herself within that range? Brandon had a headset on with a microphone under his chin. So your guess is as good as mine. We never found out the answer to that. And we did wonder whether that was the lady who was the medium for Red Cloud. I think her name was Estelle Roberts. Sounds like a very posh English lady's accent to me. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the précis of the book On the Edge of the Etheric. You should be able to buy it from the Spiritualists National Union at Redwoods, next door to Arthur Findlay College, AFC Stansted. Hopefully it's still in print. It'll be the 150th edition, no doubt. To me, On the Edge of the Etheric is the gateway book to spiritualism, because the evidence therein is just profound. Thank you.